The other day I received an email from AARP. I know I'm in that demographic now. Some of you may have received the same email that read, "Look around you. Are you surrounded by the stuff in your house that you don't know what to do with or how to find it when you need it? Maybe it's time to downsize and declutter." And then there was this advertisement for cleanup expert and TV personality Max Paxton, who's on A&E, the show called Hoarders. And he will show you how to manage the emotions we attach to physical items and what to toss and to what to keep. It reminded me of comedian George Carlin's monologue years ago about the accumulation of stuff and the anxiety that accompanies it. So maybe some of you remember George Carlin's monologue. It went, "You got your stuff with you? I bet you do. Guys have stuff in their pockets. Women have stuff in their purses. Stuff is important. You got to take care of your stuff. You got to have a place for your stuff. That's what life is all about, trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is, a place to keep your stuff. If you didn't have so much stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. A house is just a pile of stuff with a cover on it. You can see that when you're taking off in an airplane. You look down and you see all the little piles of stuff. Everybody's got his own pile of stuff. So now you've got a household of stuff. And even though you might like your house, you got to move. Got to get a bigger house. Why? Too much stuff. And that means you got to move all your stuff. Or maybe put some of your stuff in storage. Storage! Imagine that. There's a whole industry based on keeping an eye on other people's stuff. Now, we're laughing with George Carlin because there's some element of truth in that. And you and I may roll our eyes, every time someone talks about that Marie Kondo and the Con-Marie method, of downsizing and decluttering, where you're invited to take out all your stuff, like all your books at one time and put them on the floor. And then you're invited to touch each book and glance at that book and remember what that book brought to you. And then to ask yourself whether that book still brings you joy. And if it doesn't, you are asked to release it. So I did this with my mom when she moved to Homewood. It took us 3 hours to pack 2 boxes because of all the joy conversation that went on with those items. So when we were moving things and packing things up during the construction project, I was able to release 21 boxes of books from my office. Books that I thought, I'm never going to go back to the original Greek anymore, not at my age. Somebody else could use these books. And I was real proud of myself for what I was able to release. And then it came to my scrap paper drawer. And I still think to this day I might need therapy for that because I could not release the scrap paper. Maybe it's because the books had a good home and I knew somebody would use it, and I just couldn't see putting that scrap paper into the recycling bin because there was nothing wrong with the scrap paper. But what is it about scrap paper? Every day we create more scrap paper in the office. It's not as if we don't have enough scrap paper. But do you get anxious about these kinds of things? Like what we need to do about stuff? Like what do you keep? How many years of your financial records? And do I keep that dress or that pair of platform shoes, which actually is now coming back into style? How much of this stuff do we keep? But I realized in that construction project that the emphasis was all wrong. It wasn't that I was keeping my eye and holding on to stuff. It was that I wasn't asking the right question. The question was about life. If all of this stuff is in the way from us doing our ministry, if all of this stuff is taking up space, so much space that there's no place for light or the room of the Holy Spirit to come in, then I'm asking myself the wrong question. It's not the stuff I ought to be thinking about and contemplating, although it's good to start letting that stuff go. We ought to be contemplating and considering, what is it that gives us life? And what is it that we're holding on to that may or may not give us life? That's what Jesus asks us to do when he tells us the parable of the rich fool. He tells this tragic story of a successful accumulator, of a man who accumulates so much stuff that he has to build bigger and bigger barns to store all that stuff. And as Jesus tells the story, we get the sense that this whole man's life is focused on getting more stuff, accumulating more riches. There's no sense in there of whether the man ever shared anything. There is no sense of joy with this stuff. There's only anxiety about what he's going to do with all that stuff. Have those riches brought the man life? Jesus said one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. The word life occurs 3 times in this passage. We need to pay attention when Jesus repeats a word that often. Jesus is asking his hearers and us to seek the abundant life. And part of the abundant life is enjoying what we eat and drink. Part of the abundant life is going on vacation. Part of the abundant life is sharing our food and clothing and time and energy. Abundant life does not consist in hoarding or accumulating more and more stuff. If all we do is add to our piles, we're just creating more and more anxiety. And how is that living? You and I have seen the joy that comes from sharing. In a few weeks, over 1,500 children and youth will receive school supplies thanks to your generosity and the generosity of members of our community. If you look in the bins downstairs, you'll see school supplies, and my garage is slowly getting filled with all kinds of things. You're giving food for blessings in a backpack. I've experienced the joy that comes when someone comes into the office and smiles as they hand me a check for the youth group mission trip or one of the seemingly endless projects we have going on with our historic buildings. I see the joy when someone knows that their financial gift will make a difference. And when they give that gift now, they see how it can transform the life of our church or how it can transform other people's lives. I like to talk about money, and I am not going to apologize for that. And I know Ginny likes to talk about money, and I know Jill likes to talk about money, and Carolyn likes to talk about money, and Will and Cliff like to talk about money. But we need all of us to talk about money because it's a gift. And why is it that we're always able to talk about giving food or giving clothing? But what is it that comes with this conversation around money? You know, Ken and I are savers. We're both German background, you know that. We have saved well for our retirement. We will not live like kings of the hill, but we will be able to live a comfortable life. And because we know that, we know we're able to give money away now where we can see where it can make a difference. We can look at our retirement account and our investments, and we can say, yeah, we've done a good job because we live a simple life. But looking at that retirement account isn't what gives us joy. What brings us joy is the money that we give to ERUCC and the difference it makes. What brings us joy is knowing that our gift can make a difference to One Great Hour Sharing or United or Lancaster Seminary or Catawba College or the Ovarian Cancer Research or to Heart Association or to the youth group or the Religious Coalition. Buying more stuff will only create more anxiety in our lives. We already have enough stuff. But I will tell you that it's challenging some days to talk with members of our church about how much is enough and how much you need to save and how much do you give away. I know the fear about retirement. I understand the fear about medical issues. I know we want to save for our kids' educations. We want to have free time and vacations. And each of us has a threshold for what feels right in terms of our savings. But I have to say there is a spiritual issue when I am the recipient, or some of you are the recipient, of anxiety and anger when we talk about money in the life of this church. When someone says to me, all the church ever does is talk about money, it's very difficult for me not to be sarcastic and say, really? Really? Of all the things we do all the time, that's what you hear. But it's because that's what someone hears. It's out of their fear and their anxiety. But also, I would not be a good pastor if I didn't talk about money. Because your monetary gifts, like food and clothing and your time, can bring you joy. So why shouldn't I talk about something that might bring you joy? And you've heard me say this before, I don't understand the disconnect between my Rotary Club and the church. The morning Rotary Club that I attend does talk about money all the time. They really do, much more than we do. And it's with a sense of joy and excitement because they are committed to those projects. My Rotary Club knows that that money that goes for the Boys and Girls Club or the United Way or whatever it is, Blessings in a Backpack, transforms lives, and they are not afraid to ask for it. And I sit at my Rotary Club and I think, isn't what we're doing at ERUCC and through the United Church of Christ and through the Universal Church just as important and as transformative as the Rotary Club of Carroll Creek? So why are we afraid to talk about this gift? I've seen the anxiety that comes from people when they go down this dark pit of despair, of hoarding or holding on out of fear of not enough. When this is something we can talk about in community and not be afraid to share those fears and figure out ways that our gifts can bring all of us joy. It's an age-old problem, and we know that Jesus talked more about money than he talked about anything else in the scriptures. And he said, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. It's an age-old challenge, as Jesus reminds us in this story of the man and his stuff and the need to build bigger barns. Because that man comes to the end of his life, and what does he have to show? A bunch of barns filled with stuff. What could he have done with those riches? There's an alternative, Jesus says. I've come that you may have life and you may have it more abundantly. There's an alternative in placing our trust in stuff. And it's not buying another book or watching another video about decluttering and downsizing. The alternative is to take the time to listen to our lives and consider what brings us joy, and then to place our resources in those areas, whether it's our time, whether it's our money, whether it's our energy. The alternative is to place trust not in the accumulation of more stuff because we might just need it someday, but to trust in God and the community to help us work through those questions. The alternative is to see that all of what we have is a gift, and to hear Jesus' words about sharing with our neighbor in need, and to consider the ways in which sharing what we have will bring others life, but will bring us life as well. Ken and I are a work in progress when it comes to the mastery of our tendency to collect stuff. When we bought our house here in Frederick, it came with a barn, a 2-story barn, a quaint little carriage house that has plenty of room for stuff. And we filled it, and it's still full. We moved all our Pennsylvania stuff here. We moved my mom's stuff in there. We moved the kids' stuff in there when they returned home. But we're getting better. And after Chris moves out again tomorrow, we'll have a little more room in that barn. And now if I can just get Ken to part with his elementary school papers, we will be getting somewhere.